What is the most dangerous mountain in the world? Ask someone with zero mountain climbing knowledge which is the most dangerous mountain in the world, and the answer will be Mount Everest in at least 95% of cases. This line of thinking is due to the misconception that the taller a mountain is, the more dangerous it becomes. Even though Everest is the tallest mountain in existence, standing at approximately 8,848 meters in altitude, it's not the toughest to ascend. There are other mountains out there vastly deadlier than Everest that challenge the limits of even the most skilled and courageous climbers. And now, let's get to know each one. Stick with me in this video and let's get started. On this mountain, the 10th highest in the world, climbers have scaled its avalanche-prone peak. Around 300 people perished in the same time frame, making Annapurna's mortality rate of 34% the highest amongst 8,000-meter high mountains. Although Annapurna was the first 8,000-meter peak to be scaled, it continues to be a challenge and an attraction. The area around Annapurna is popular for hiking and was the site of what many call the worst trekking disaster of all time in Nepal. In 2014, a snowstorm caused avalanches and the death of 43 people. Nearly 2 meters of snow fell in 12 hours and over 500 people needed rescue. Fortunately, the rate is steadily declining thanks to a better understanding of the paths and resources necessary to succeed on the road. Only 73 deaths were recorded. Known to locals as King of the Mountains, or in a more sinister way, Killer Mountain, this jagged monster in Pakistan is a huge range of rock and ice. Nanga Parbat is the 9th highest in the world, and its south side is what many call the highest mountain on the planet. The Rupal face rises to 4,599 meters above its base. This mountain was the Germans' focus in the 1930s. When only Britain had access to Mount Everest, German climbers saw Nanga Parbat as the tallest mountain reasonably climbable at the time. But that doesn't mean it was easy. Assassin's Mountain took 31 lives before it was conquered by Austrian Hermann Bull in 1953. Since then, that number has risen to over 60 lost lives, with a death rate exceeding 20%. Climate change makes the highly technical ascent even harder and more deadly. The second highest mountain in the world has a dark reputation, mostly with climbers. The first lady to reach the top was the legendary Polish climber Wanda Racewicz, getting there in June of '86. In the next 18 years, 5 lady climbers who climbed there were killed. 3 died coming down K2, 2 more in nearby mountains. In 2017, Vanessa O'Brien was the first American lady to get to that mountain's top. K2's remoteness and long approach made the whole expedition super time-consuming and needed a lot of resources. Weather and avalanches are bad there, taking the lives of almost 10% of people who try. On any snowy mountain, avalanches are a risk. But Manaslu is famous for sweeping climbers off the mountain. At 26,778 feet tall, Manaslu is the 8th highest mountain with steep sides that don't protect against bad avalanches. In 2012, an horrific accident occurred when an avalanche stormed down the mountain, sweeping away a tent camp where approximately 30 people were sleeping. This single avalanche claimed the lives of 12 climbers and seriously injured many more. In spite of the avalanche risk, the mountain attracted hundreds of climbers eager to conquer its challenging heights. The larger the crowd, the higher the chance for accidents and more difficult it will be for climbing groups to plan and navigate around each other. Sadly, Manaslu claimed several lives that year. One of the deadliest peaks in the world, it is one of the few mountains that have not seen a continuous decline in the death rate. In fact, the death rate has been rising. The death rate per group of climbers is 20%, which essentially means that for every 5 climbers who attempted to climb this mountain, 1 died. In the Himalayas along the border between India and Nepal, frequent avalanches and high death rates have made Kanchenjunga one of the most dangerous mountains in the world to climb. Kanchenjunga is 28,586 feet high and notorious for fatalities due to oxygen depletion, exposure, falling rocks, and avalanches. This mountain is so complex that there isn't an easy road to the summit. Every climber has to meticulously devise a strategy and make tough life or death choices when bad weather strikes. Diao Ligare translates to stunning mountain, but don't be fooled by the name. Despite the undeniable beauty of the mountain, it's known to be a physically and mentally demanding climb only experienced climbers should consider. At 26,827 feet high, climbers face a drop in oxygen levels. However, many traditionalists choose not to bring oxygen tanks. Currently, there are 82 reported fatalities, most of them caused by avalanches. Yet, since the first successful summit in 1960, the total death count is about 1 each year. While that may not seem like an alarming number, there have been fewer than 500 successful summits. The tallest peak in the Alps has a long history of climbing and climbing accidents. In 1786, its first summit, completed by Jack Bauber and Michael Parker, was heralded as the beginning of modern mountaineering. Mount Black is among the busiest mountains in the world, with about 20,000 people climbing yearly, but all its routes present risks of rockfall and avalanches during the peak season. Rescue services are known to conduct an average of 12 missions per weekend and have the highest fatality rate of any mountain in Europe, with an estimated 100 deaths per year. The Atlantic described the reason for the mountain's lethality as the frequent portrayal of Mount Black as a long hike rather than a challenging climb. Mount Everest, the world's most famous mountain, is 8,850 meters high and was conquered in 1953. Since the successful first climb by Lord Edmund Hillary and Thins Norgay in 1953, thousands of climbers have gathered to try their luck and reach the summit. With its standout status, it would be easy to assume that Mount Everest is the deadliest mountain of all. However, it's important to clarify that it's far from the most dangerous mountain in the world. This because Everest has a very small percentage of climbers, considering the number of attempts each year. Much of this myth about Mount Everest is only because it's the highest mountain in the world, and therefore, in the early 20th century, its climb was widely hyped by the press. Although some deaths have somewhat predictable causes, avalanches and winter storms account for only about 59% of the deaths on the mountain. The other 41% are a bit less direct. Upon reaching 8,000 meters, you will enter the so-called Everest death zone. 94 people lost their lives in this region due to much darker circumstances. Altitude sickness, frostbite, or hypothermia might have gotten to them. Most bodies of the deceased were left on the mountain, so only Everest and God know the real cause. Since the year 2000, there have been 1.4 deaths for every 100 climbers. In its history, it has more than 7,500 registered summits. Over 310 people died trying to reach the mountain's peak. Many of these deaths have been because of altitude sickness, falls, and avalanches. Today, about 800 climbers make the journey every year and their death rate drops little by little. And would you dare to face any of these mountains? Thank you so much for sticking around until the end, and see you in the next video.